Hello, meet Magento Brazil. My name is Willem. I'm from Hyva. You might know us from the lightning fast Magento frontend that we've built, which makes developers' lives easier and more fun. We started off with building a team frontend for Magento that's reinventing the traditional front-end. Instead of creating a headless single-page application, we rebuilt the standard front-end from scratch using technologies you already know and love, but with only 2 libraries, making it a lot easier and more straightforward to build a custom front-end for Magento. Today I want to talk about the Hyvä Toolbox and what we build into Hyvä products that make your lives easier and development more fun. So Hyvä means good, desirable and trustworthy, which is basically in the core and the DNA of our company. We want to create the best possible products and create tools that make people's life better, from developers to project managers to agency owners to extension developers to the eventual merchant and end user. Faster websites convert better and are more fun to use. So that's a win-win-win situation. We were founded in 2020. We launched the team, the first version in February 2021. We grew to 8 people. Soon we're going to 10 people. Our customers are in over 65 countries. Over 600 agencies work with our software, and there's over 1,600 stores live on Hyvä today. And we're really proud on the ecosystem and community that we built around Hyvä, including extension providers, payment providers, hosting providers, and a community of over 3,000 developers currently on our Slack. So probably even a lot more that are not on our Slack. We try to create positive energy and vibe into the Magento community, which was sorely needed. Most of the biggest extension providers and solution providers work with Hyva, have Hyva compatible extensions. More and more are fully stepping into the Hyva ecosystem, and some even made all of their extensions compatible with Hyva already. So yeah, that's one of the requirements that we needed to make Hyva a success, was to have the vibrant ecosystem and the extensions work with Hyva. So we're really proud and thankful of everyone that's involved in this and is collaborating on that with us. We see amazing growth. The adoption of Hyva is really good. You can see almost 1,800 stores registered in build with, and that's a number that keeps growing. We used to call ourselves Hyvä Teams. We're more than a team, so we've adapted to just call ourselves Hyvä. It's a registered trademark, and we're more than a team. So we wanted to reflect that also in the name. We recently launched our own checkout, a whole new product. We already had a React checkout. Now we also have a PHP-based checkout. We're building a lot of tooling around Hyva to make working with Hyva more enjoyable and easier. And as I said, we have a great community and ecosystem surrounding Hyva. And we're building more products. You'll see a little bit of the Hyvä UI in this presentation, which is a collection of components that can be used with a Hyvä team to quickly build a team and build in custom headers, footers, you name it, different swatches, newsletter pop-ups, content elements, and much more. And we're working on commerce, Adobe Commerce compatibility and BTP compatibility, and you'll soon hear a lot more about that we're giving that a big push in the second half of this year. So we're focused on developer happiness. All of those aspects, the community, the ecosystem, the tooling, the products, contribute to developer happiness. And making people happy is our main objective. So what do we do across our products to make developers happy? Let me show you around and show what Hyvä is about. So you might be familiar with this. It's the demo Hyvä store. It's using the Vinia sample data in this case. And if you inspect Hyvä, you can see that load times, well, this is using browser extensions, but the amount of requests is really mostly images, and for the core functionality of Hyvä, we only use one JavaScript library, that's Alpine.js, and there's one style sheet that's built with Tailwind CSS. And that's super lightweight. You can see it's only 20 kilobytes gzipped, so that makes for optimal performance. With Hyvä out of the box, you can score green scores in Hyvä. If you look at this without my browser extensions, you can see the requests, just 15 requests, of which half of them is images. So, and this is even with caches disabled in the local instance that I have running. So yeah, it's fast. So when you go out and build a Hyvä team, there's a lot of tooling that you can use to simplify things compared to Luma, for example. So maybe a good way to show how components are built is by overriding a core template file. So let's look if we add one product to the cart. You can see the success message here. Now I'm gonna use something from our UI library that's going to be released soon. That's different message components. And there's a preview here. And you can see the different styles of messages that we can show there instead of this pop-up banner. And with that example, I can show you a little bit how Hyvä works as a tool as a developer. So let me take this file and just paste it into a Magento frontend team. So this is just a bare bone team, no changes made yet. Let me just paste this one directory in there, and you can see it's just messages.html that's added there. I have my caches disabled. Let me go here, bin Magento cache status. You can see that layout, block, and full page is disabled, so any change I make in my team is directly affecting the front end. And I have a CSS watcher for Tailwind running, so any change that I make, so you can see when I update this file, just make let's just save the file, you can see it's recompiling here, and just takes 200 milliseconds, and then a change to the CSS files made. So that's fast, so that you can switch between PHP Storm or your own editor to the front end team. Now let me add something to the cart again, and you can see we have a different style banner, a notification banner on the top, and this comes with a couple of settings you can put in through layout XML, so you can set the display mode to toggle between these different modes. So in the messages.html file, you can see one of the things that we did is really encapsulate all of the functionality of one component into one HTML file. So wherever we can, we try to really isolate all functionality in one file. That has a lot of benefits. With Luma, classically, if you want to change one functionality, if you want to see where a price render is, you have to go into 50 different JavaScript files to find the exact right file that's compiled into in the front end, and see what renderer is being used by require.js and knockout, and it includes mix-ins, and it's really hard to debug. So with Hyvä you have a single file, and we use Alpine.js, which is basically a method. So one component has one method, and that method is simply a JavaScript object. And that object can contain variables or methods. And this is really everything that you need to render these messages in the front end. So messages are being pulled from a cookie using the private content data that Luma also works with. But that listens to an event. So when the browser loads the private content, which typically works through a network requests to sections. So here you can see sections. In sections there can be a messages object. Let's see if we can get that here. No, that's being set through a cookie. So in this case it's being pulled in through a cookie on the add to cart. So the message is pulled from a cookie. But in some cases, if you add something to the cart with Ajax or remove something from the cart, maybe that I can show if I delete it here. That's the Ajax method. So remove item and then sections. That also works with a cookie. Okay. Anyway, so a message is pulled either from cookie or from local storage, and then it's dispatched as a global window event. And in the Alpine method, you can listen for these events. So private content loaded is always being triggered when the page loads and the section data from a customer is available. And in this case, we pull the messages object from there and then add it to the messages object here. And then there's a little bit of custom coding where we, for this messages object, we look for, well, it's a success error, what kind of message it is, and then what kind of background color and what kind of icon we need to show. So for a warning, you get a different icon and color. These icons here, that's one of the coolest things I think that we built in as a tool is the SVG icons, which you can also find from our docs.hyva.io, SVG icons. So that's a basic set of icons from Heroicons. And there's a V2 package built by a community that you can use, but we implemented the V1 version. And basically all of these icons are readily available from this SVG icon view model that we created. And you can pull those in anywhere in a HTML file. So there's two concepts here that you can see in the way that you can use view models and the SVG icons. Firstly, you can see that we use view models here, which is a global object that's available to any HTML file. Just like block is globally available and escaper, we added view models to that, and you can require a view model. So instead of defining that through layout XML, which you do with standard Magento, you can just pull in any view model in a HTML file, no dependency. So that means you don't have two files, a layout XML and a HTML file, you just do everything in one file. That makes it a lot more transportable as well. You can just put that HTML file anywhere you want, no dependencies, everything just works. Here we pull in SVG view model for Heroicon Solid. There's two variations. There's the solid one and the outline one. So those are different view models. You can see that here, the Heroicon Solid. So we just pull that in, and then on Hero icons, we can pull in any SVG by just calling the SVG name and HTML. So if you want to change the check circle, so this is a circle with a check in it. If you want to change that, there's autocomplete. So we just say check, and I want to have the regular check HTML, and I save this, and I add something to the cart again. And you can see the SVG icon changed. And the advantage that this has is that SVG icons are being rendered inline. So for performance, having an SVG rendered in your HTML means there's no additional request to the server. So no DNS lookup, no extra data being pulled in. Everything is just rendered with the rest of the page. And that gives you a lot more performance gains than just loading in all of the SVGs with separate files. And best thing about SVGs is they're always high quality because they're vector objects. So that works really nicely. So SVG icons we use throughout the whole team. And you can pass this any CSS class. So you could say BG white here. And padding 4 and rounded corners. And let's see, well, then you have white and white. Let's say we do background yellow 500, for example. And you can see the CSS is compiling, so this yellow 500 is automatically being generated now. And I add something to the cart again. Let's see, I have no clue if that even looks nice. Okay, so there's no text color. If we also add that, let's say text white, and then do it again. Anyway, you get the point. You can pass variables to here, and things work on the fly. You can set the sizing of the SVG object, and it's just really versatile. So any graphics we use in the team, if you look at layered navigation, so icons like these are SVGs. This is rendered through SVG view model, and these as well. So another thing we can show is maybe a newsletter pop-up that we built. Let's take that from the UI library as well and paste that into the team. So in newsletter, there's a layout file that just adds it. It adds the script to the footer. This is a pop-up, so it's not rendered inline, but it's on top of the page, and it looks if newsletter newsletter is active, and then it renders model.html here. And here again, you see we use the view model for SVGs, and we have a view model for modals. And models are also documented. So models, you can see there's different ways to render a model. You can do it entirely with just JavaScript, or you can render them with PHP. Here's an example. Create a model with PHP. Assign a template file to it, so you can have a separate file where you write the HTML for the pop-up. And then there's a couple of options you have, disabling the overlay in the background, or where you want to position the pop-up, different classes you can assign to them. So that's also really versatile. And we put a lot of focus on making it accessible with tabbing and everything. It includes reCAPTCHA, which is also built into a view model, and that's really important. Like, view models are first citizen methods in Hyvä team. We try to get rid of as much classes, block classes, as Magento officially recommends. Instead of you writing a block for every HTML file functionality that you need, it's better to create view models that have a single responsibility, and you can compose them together in a HTML file and reuse view models much more. So with the Hyvä team, in the team module, right here, under view models, you see there's a bunch of view models that we use, for example, to render prices, or for the currency switcher, to pull the current product data on a category or on a product page. You can pull in the current product. And there's a bunch of view models that we use that are easy to extend and reusable. So there's also one for reCAPTCHA, which makes adding reCAPTCHA to any form really easy. Let me see, here we pull in a legal notice that's rendered here. It's also documented. You can copy and paste this from the base theme, the way that it works. Anyway, we create a model here. We center it. We remove some standard classes, add new ones to it. And then here's the content of the model, which is just HTML that we render as with content on this model. If we reload the homepage and I delete cookies, because I already removed the newsletter pop-up once, or closed it. So you can see we just copy and pasted this into the theme, and it's fully functional. That's also the idea of the UI library that we built. That is a starting reference, that are well-designed components that you can use in your projects. And everything here just works. Like if you close the modal, you can see here in the Alpine component how that works. We have a cookie name for when the modal is closed. So a newsletter modal close is being set if you close the modal or send in with your email, then it doesn't show again. And this works quite intuitively. Like if you know modern JavaScript, it's just methods on an object. There's always an init method available in the Alpine component, and in this case we check, should we show the model, which is pulled from a cookie, should show model Hyvä get cookie. So that's also a helper available on the window object, get cookie, set cookie, for example. So we see if that cookie is set. If it's not set, we show the pop-up after 1 second. If you close the model, we hide it, and then we set the close cookie, which is a method here that you see Hyvä set cookie, and we hide it for a year. So you can change this to 30 days, for example, whatever you like. So if I close it now, you will see newsletter model closed, and it won't show again if I reload. So that gives you kind of an impression of the elements that come together in one HTML file. So PHP with view models that pull in your data from products or the customer session or whatever. You can work with customer section data really easily. It's probably best to show that through the documentation. Section data, working with section data. There's a global event, as I already said. If a page is loaded, private content loaded is being triggered. And with that, you can do pretty much anything with the customer session or section data. So here you see an example. If private content is loaded, we trigger a method, receive customer data. And from the data, we pull the card data and the customer data. And this is a simple example. I can copy this into a file. Let's say, let's abuse the model. Just paste it in here. That file is already loaded on the front end. Right here. see if it renders. Renders in the footer. Let's move that to content so we can see it better. Right here, let's add it. It's the last item of the page. Okay, right here, welcome, and there's no name. So if I sign in, and let's see if that works. Quickly create an account. Let's go for anything that it accepts. It's a local instance, so okay. So you can see it renders the customer name here from the customer data section. Customer section data. So it receives customer data. It's really easy to just put a debugger in here. So this will be triggered, debugger. This will be triggered when private content is loaded, and we can inspect what's happening there in the browser. So let's refresh again, and we can see we have the debugger here, and let's inspect data. And you can see this is the entire customer section data object. So everything is here. In cards, you can see what's currently in my cart. In customer, you can see a customer name. And messages, if those are pulled from the customer section data. So this is really easy to work with. This is available on any page load. So stuff that comes from the cart can be pulled in by just listening to the private content loaded event. And then it sets customer on this Alpine component, and it can just pull in the customer first name, which comes from here. Customer first name Willem. If we change it to full name, we get our full name. Let's remove the debugger. Welcome, Willem Wickman. So that's how we simplified how customer section data worked. One of the things that I found most troublesome working with Luma, the complexity of customer section data was awful. And this just puts everything into one really simple spot where it's dispatched and always available through that event. And there's ways to manually renew customer section data. You can trigger here, dispatch new customer event. And that's just a vanilla JavaScript method. And this can be used if in the meantime, if you do an AJAX request and you then want to pull in new customer data after that, it would change here. So if I would sign out in a different tab, sign out, and I go to the previous page and it dispatches event, you can see this event is interactive. So that's a really easy way to accomplish things like that. Another really cool tool that we have is a JIT compilation in the Magento admin. So in any, let's go to the home page. And edit that. In the page builder, we can add HTML, and we can use any Tailwind class here, and those Tailwind classes, when I save the page, are compiled into Tailwind and then rendered inline. So that means you don't put all of these Tailwind classes in your main style sheet while you only need it on one page. They're only loaded on that one page, and it's not a separate server request, which adds extra load time. It's rendered inline. It has a very strict CSS scope. So the CSS that we generate is prefixed with the CMS page or the block ID. So this is CMS page 6, and those Tailwind classes are compiled inline. Let me jump to where those are defined. That should be here above. So here you see for this page, these CSS classes are compiled, and it's, well, there's a bit more classes in this component, but the amount of bytes that you send for these changes is really low. So it's really optimized for performance. And if you delete something from the CMS, the CSS is also gone, so you never get bloat or technical debt in your CSS files. So that works really nicely. And these are components that will also be available in the UI library. So we have some call to actions, for example, that I can show. If you look at the README, it's a call to action with two buttons. So if I go to CMS content here and I copy the whole thing, and then I go into CMS and I was already using that one. Let's take another one to show the difference better. Let's take some USBs. This one should look like this. So let's go into the HTML code, paste it. So you can see the Tailwind classes have been generated. And if I reload the page, caches are disabled. So this takes, especially Magento admin, becomes a bit slower without caches. Doesn't have all of the Tailwind classes yet. Let's try that again. Yeah, there you go. So now we have a whole different set of styles that come with the CMS page 6. Different classes compiled just for this element. And these are fully responsive. So we have a bunch of components like these that you'll be able to use on a About Us page or on your home page, different banners and sliders. That will be a separate product that we're releasing on top of Hyvä. Just like we launched our own checkout. You can see more about that on Hyvä.io and then go to the checkout. The UI is also here. So if you want to learn more about what we're going to release with the UI, you can see that here. Then the checkout is almost going out of early access. We're working on making payment methods compatible. So Stripe, PayPal, Braintree, global methods like that. Adyen, Buckaroo, we already have multi-SafePay, Molly. So that's going quite nicely, and the product has been tested, and quite a few checkouts are live today. So I want to show lastly how we improved developer experience with the checkout that we built. So if you go to the checkout here, let's remove that component that we just built in this one. Let's just delete the stuff, don't need it anymore. Okay, let's reload. Okay, so this is the Hyvä checkout, and I'd like to show this also in incognito so you can see what requests are being loaded if you don't have browser extensions installed. Inspect, network. Okay, we go to the checkout. So this is the React checkout with the standard layout. And you can see these are the requests that are needed to load the checkout. Mind you, caches are disabled and it ran it in 300 milliseconds. There's only one style sheet again. There's two JavaScript files now. There's Alpine and there's Livewire. Now Livewire is the library that MageWire is built with. MageWire is a product that one of my colleagues built, Willem Poortman. You can learn more about MageWire if you go to GitHub. MageWire is basically a library that allows you to move all your JavaScript logic from the front end to the back end. So basically, you replace JavaScript interactions with PHP code. And that's a really cool way to separate the logic of your backend with all of the interactivity in the front end. So whenever you make a change here, if I'm going to enter an address, say postal code, number, mail and domain.com, and I set my shipping method, you can see there are requests to send data and to fetch new data. Those are triggered automatically. And all that happens here to create that interactivity is, if I can find it in the front end here, it's some MageWire methods. Let's see if I change here. Wire model. That's basically binding method, a class in the backend. So in the backend you have method, which is the currently selected shipping method. And when you change that, that actually is stored in a variable in PHP. And in the front end, you don't need to sync those variables or keep state in the front end and in the back end. All of the session state and the customer state, your card data, all lives in the back end. And the front end only renders it, updates changes through AJAX requests, and you don't need any JavaScript to make it work otherwise. Now, with this checkout, we built a layout system that allows you to switch between different layouts of the checkout. So we have a one-step checkout, which has 3 columns, and we have a multi-step checkout with 2 columns. But extending this is super easy, and changing which checkout you're currently using is as simple as selecting one of the layouts from the backend. So if we switch from the standard layout, the 2-column one, which has 2 steps, so we just came from shipping, and then if we go to the next step, I can also fill in the data here. Save it. Next step. Does it validate? Yes. So this is a 2-step checkout, and if I want to change that to the 1-step checkout, just change it from the admin here. Normally you would flush your cache, but that shouldn't be necessary because the important caches are disabled. Yeah. So now you have a 1-step checkout. 3 columns. Payment is moved in the middle column, and everything from the previously second step is now also in this first step. So that's 2 different layouts out of the box. But the way you can extend this is really easy. So if you create your own module and you create a Hyvä checkout XML file in etc, I can easily define a new checkout in layout XML. I can give it a name and a label, and I can define which parent it should use to inherit all of the steps and all of the standard data from. So I'm inheriting from the default layout now. Let's disable this for now. Let's just add one custom checkout layout. So I've saved this, and I'll go back to the admin, and Hyvä test is right here. So that's the label that I added, and without any changes otherwise, it will show me the standard layout. So this is the 2-step layout that you just saw. Now, if I want to add an extra step to this, all I need to do is a step as a child node. I'm adding the step after shipping. I'm calling the step agreements, and it has a label, terms and agreements. And if I refresh the checkout, you can see terms and agreements is here in the breadcrumbs on the top. And also the next button changed to reflect what the next step is. So proceed to terms and agreements. And if I go to the next step, you can see it's an empty step, but the stepping mechanism all works. I can go back and I can go forward. So nothing changed otherwise. I just have an extra step that does nothing. Now, if I define a layout and I use the name of this layout, test, so Hyvä checkout test, that means I'm making changes to the test layout. Now, I specified the payment step in this layout. So let's specify the agreements one, the one that we just added. So that's this middle step. And I'm gonna pull in one standard component which contains quote actions, which includes the terms and agreements on the final step normally. So if I reload it again and I go to the second step, you can see it shows please accept the terms, which comes from the backend. And it runs with an overlay. I can deny them, I can accept them, but if I don't accept them, there's validation in place and I cannot go to the next step. Now, all of these things, like the way that you implement a condition for a step or the validation, you can add. So what's interesting about this step, so we could, it's too much in depth now, but I could set a condition for this step. I can show that in the core product probably. If you look at the Hyvä checkout source and then view, and I look at my layouts, and if I go and look at the virtual layout, that is defined. If I go into etc. and then I look at my Hyvä checkout, there is a condition is physical, and here's a step for is virtual. Yeah, this is a good example. So here you see a condition. If the step is payment, I can do a check. I can update the handle, so I can pull in Hyvä checkout default virtual. So that changes the current layout handle to virtual instead of the standard one. And I can override methods if the current card is virtual. So you can see that condition. Can I quickly show that? Is virtual. That's a condition that's set here. So these are the core conditionals that you can add. Is it a customer? Is it a guest? Is it a physical or is it a virtual card? And is virtual has a simple check. Get quote is virtual. So if that's true, the condition applies that the layout handle default virtual is being loaded. And default virtual you can see right here. If it's virtual, we don't need the shipping summary. We don't need the shipping section because we're not shipping anything. So we're removing shipping and removing the totals, the calculations from the price summary because we don't need the shipping section in the cart totals. This is super extensive, like the way you can customize your checkout with this and create alternative if you have a B2B, like the extra step for terms and agreements, you can make that conditional only if the customer group is free, which are B2B customers in that case. And you can make this super easily a 5-step checkout just by moving components into newly defined steps in layout XML. So there's a lot more to say about this checkout, but I think this nails one of the greatest things. Like checkout has been the biggest pain point of Luma and e-commerce in general. And I think with this that we really built a tool where you'll be happy enjoying tasks like adding a newsletter subscription checkmark which would take you several days with Luma, would only take you 1 or 2 hours with this checkout. And we hear people integrating payment methods are really enthusiastic about the APIs that we built for that, the ease of how you can implement payment methods, and all of the different features that we built into this. And I cannot stress enough, the performance of this is so much better than the alternatives, so that can only drive conversion. If you look at Luma on a mobile device with 3G, it takes over 30 seconds to load the initial checkout on a mobile device. With us, the full load is about 2 seconds. If it takes longer than that, you lose your customers. It's as simple as that. So yeah, with that, I would like to conclude this virtual tour of Hyvä teams and the things that we built into Hyvä to make your lives easier. And I hope this was interesting, inspiring, and makes you enthusiastic to also start working with Hyvä to improve your developing life. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a fantastic event the rest of the day. And I'll see you on our Slack in our great community. Thank you.